Hello everyone, welcome to chapter 6 of analytics programming, where you're going to learn about data loading and data storage, like how to load the data from external file, from different kind of external files like CSV, TSV, Excel, JSON, how to handle the JSON file and how to read the data from HTML file. So database, even database, how to read the file from database. So these are the stuff that we are going to cover in this chapter. So let's get started. So first, let's see how to read the file from CSV. So as we know, Panda has two type of data structures. That is series and data frame. Series is nothing but one-dimensional array, and data frame is nothing but two-dimensional array. Mostly we'll be focusing on the table related data, table kind of data, the data which is in table structure. So as you know, the CSV file that is a kind of it's like it will have rows and columns. Data will be saved as rows and column in CSV file, right? So first let's start with the CSV file as it is the most commonly used file that will be handling using pandas. So let's import pandas. Okay, and then we have to have the data file handler. So as you might have learned it in Python. So we have to have the file handling variable to save the file that we are trying to load. Okay, so pd object dot the method that we are going to use from the pandas object is read underscore CSV. So if you use the tab, you can find the read CSV. Can how many type of files that we can handle using Panda, CSV, Excel, HTML, HDF, JSON. So different types of file that we can handle that we are going to see in this lecture. Okay, so next we're going to give the folder location, the file location where the CSV file has been located. So in Folio, I have uploaded the source file that is needed for this lab. Okay, for this chapter 6 lab. So what are the source files that is needed? I have uploaded it in the Folio. Okay, so if you go to module 6, chapter 6 resources, it is a zip file. So you have to download this file. If you download this file, you can see the source file that is needed to do this lab exercise. So you have to have all these files. You have to have all the resource file in the same level of this Jupyter notebook file that you're currently working on. Okay, all the files should be in the same location so that you can use it. So first we have to do the loading of files. Okay, so to do the loading of files, first you have to find the location of the file. So to find the location of the file, so currently I'm here in this folder. So I'm going to use this ex1 CSV file. To find the location of the file, you have to go to the properties and then you can find the location here. So you have to just copy this location from the properties and then you can just pass this location here. Okay, but the thing is like in Windows, you have to use this backward slash instead of forward slash. Okay, so if you're in Windows operating system, please change the backward slash to forward slash. By default, when you get the port from the properties option, it will always give you the backward slash. So you have to change it to the forward slash. So please do it. If you don't do it, the pandas will not be able to read the file location. It will not be able to locate the file location. Okay, now the file name is ex1.csv. Okay, so simply I'm giving the file location. The only thing that you have to remember is you should not use the backward slash for the location. Even though you get the backward slash in the file location here, you have to convert it into forward slash. So now we have the file folder, and you can just see what is there. You can see if I open the CSV file, you can see these are the data that I have in the EX1 file. So when I try to read that, you can see when I try to locate it through this object variable, I'm able to locate it. And if you want to see the type of this data1 frame, it has been saved as a data frame itself. Even though it is a CSV file, it just process it as a data frame file. So now let's see how to read the TSV file. So I have uploaded a TSV file called table1.tsv. You can download it. You can just access it from the folder that I have uploaded, zip file that I have uploaded. So now let's see how to handle the TSV file. So to use the TSV file, you have to use the function called. Okay, so I'm creating a new folder variable, file folder, and the method name is table1. Okay, so file location, everything is same. The only thing, instead of the file ex1.csv, I'm going to use table1.tsv. Okay, so just change the file name since it is a TSV file, and just note the method name is read table. Okay, now let's locate it. Data2. Now let's repeat it. You can see these are the information that I have in the table. Okay. Now, the very important functions that we will use very often is called head and tail function, which will help us to access. Normally, when you work on the real world data, it will have hundreds of thousands of rows. Okay, so you may not want to display all the rows all at once. So you may want to look at the structure, the basic structure of the data. In that case, we can use the function called head or tail. For example, in data1 here, if I want to get, if I use the head function, then it will just get the first 5 rows of the data. Since it has only four rows, it just takes the 4 rows, but you can pass the parameters, argument value with 3. So you can see, just pick, okay, let me pick 2. Already it has only 3 values. So let me pick 2 values. You can see it will just pick the 2 values. For example, in this TSV file, we'll apply tail method. The tail method will help you to retrieve or pick the last 5 rows from the data. If it has only, if it has the less than 5 rows, then it will just display all the rows. And if you can even control the number of rows by passing the argument to this tail method. So if I pass 2, then it will just pick the last 2 rows from the data. Okay, so this is the use of head and tail method. Head method will pick the first 5 rows, and tail method will pick the last 5 rows. And if you want to reduce, you can customize the number of rows that is getting displayed, or that you have to pass the argument, okay, inside the method. So next we are going to speak about the separator. By default, the CSV is separated by comma. If you open the CSV file in Notepad, you can see it will be separated by comma. But you can use any other separator as well to save the CSV file. You can just use any separators in CSV file to separate the rows and columns. The pandas, the read CSV function is not only limited to this comma separator. You can just use any kind of separator based on the delimiter, whatever you are going to use. First, let's start with the comma separator. Okay, so let's create a new data file handler. Okay, I'm just naming it as data3 and pandas dot read table. I'm just going to use the read table function. Tab read table. Underscore table. Here, I'm just going to use the same TSV file that I have used here, the table1.csv, or maybe a TSV file. I'm going to use this CSV file here. So instead of TSV file, I'm going to use the CSV file. So it's one.csv. Okay. Seems like I have placed it in the wrong place. Data3, I'm creating a variable again. Data3 pd dot read underscore table. Either you can use the CSV or read CSV or read table. Both should work. So file location. Okay, now I'm going to pass the delimiter. So the separator. Okay, for that you have to use the parameter called SCP separator, and inside that you have to use what is the thing that what separates that columns. Okay, here comma separates the column by default. So show you how it is separated by comma. Normally you will open the CSV file as Excel in Excel, but if you open it with a notepad, then you can see the actual see how it is separated by comma by default. You can see A, B, C, D. This is the actual CSV file that you can open it in. When you open it in Excel, you will see this. But when you open it in Notepad, you can see how the columns are separated by comma. Okay, so that's why we are using the comma separator here. So we are using the comma separator here. So even you can use colon instead of comma. It's by default comma, but you can use colon, semicolon, whatever symbol that we can use. Okay, the only thing you have to use that symbol in as a value to this parameter, separator parameter. So in that case, since we have the comma as a separator, let's see how it will get retrieved. You can see it will retrieve the CSV file as a table itself. Okay, as a table itself, it will be able to retrieve. Okay. Next, we're going to see the header attribute. By default, pandas will consider the first row as header. If you look at the Excel file, you can see the first row has A, B, C, D, and message. So it will consider the first row as a header. But you can, if you don't want to specify any header, then you can say none. So when you pass the parameter header with the value none, then it will not take the first row as a header. So let's do the same. Let's take the same variable. Okay, and then pd dot read CSV. CSV, and we're going to use the same files, ex1.csv, which I have uploaded. You can use it. And this time we're going to use the parameter. The parameter name is header, and the value of the parameter is none. Okay, so none value. With that value, if you try to display this, you can see how the A, B, C, D, the first row, it was previously taken as a header by default. But when we say none, then it will take that integer value as default, and it will leave that first row as actual first row in the table. Okay, so it will not be, the first row will not be taken as the header value. So that is header attribute. And CSV method has an attribute called name attribute, which will help us to assign column names or rename the columns. Already, if the column already has the name, we can use it to rename the column. Okay, so let's create a new file holder variable. Okay, let's see the dot. Let's read the file and let's take the same file. And we're going to use the names attribute. Okay, and we're going to give the new names. Names attribute and list of names that we are going to pass. Since we have 5 columns, column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns for that. Specify the columns names 1, 2, 3, 4. Column 1. Column 2. Column 3. Column 4. And then the last column is going to be the name column. Okay. So we are passing this as a list, right? So the names attribute, we're passing it as a list. So let's see how it changes. How the names attribute will help us to change the column names here. So you can see by default, it takes 0, 1, 2, 3 for as our label. Now with the names attribute, we have changed the column name to the given names. Okay, by passing it as a list to the names attribute. Okay, so the next thing that we are going to see how you can add prefix to the numbered columns. Either you can do this or you can take the numbered column and add prefix to that. Okay, for example, let's take this data 3 where we have the prefix 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So let's add the prefix to that. Instead of using the names attribute, we can do that. So in that case, you have to use header none. Okay, always header should be none. You cannot use the prefix attribute without this header attribute specification. So now we are using another attribute called prefix, and we have to specify what has to be prefixed here. So I'm adding this column 1 has to be prefixed with all column values. Okay, and then let's run it again, and you can see with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, we have prefixed this value column. Okay, whatever I have given, with that the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 will get added. Okay, but note down, you cannot do this if the header value is assigned as none. You have to specify header as none to do this prefixing. Okay, so that is prefix attribute. Next, we're going to see the skip rows attribute. Okay, the skip rows attribute will help us to skip the row from the given file. Okay, so if you don't want to process a particular row, then we can use this attribute called skip rows, and by specifying the index of that row, we can simply ignore that row. So for example, we're saying we are creating another variable and call the CSV method and pass the file location. Okay, by passing the file location, let's create it as data file. CSV file. So now we are going to use the skip rows attribute here. So rows, and we can specify the index of the row. Okay, 2. Going to delete one row from that, and we are saving that row here in the folder called in a variable called data file. If you run it, you can see welcome. So the value skip rows 2. So if you specify skip rows 1, then the 0th row and the first row will be deleted, and it will display the last two rows. If you give skip rows 2, then the index value 0, 1, and 2, all those rows will get deleted, and it will just display the last row. Okay, so there it includes, it is like a range function, but in range function, it will exclude the given value. But in skip rows, including that given row indexing number, it will just take all, for example, if you give 2, then 0, 1, 2. These three indexes will get removed. Okay, and then it will just display the remaining rows. Here, the last row will get displayed. Okay, next attribute that we are going to see is index call attribute. So the index call attribute helps us to allow, it helps us to set which column to be used as index in the data frame. Okay, in case if you have a lot of columns and if you want to select more than one column as an index, you can, if you want to leave the other columns, you don't want to index those columns, then you can use index call attribute. Okay, so for this, we need to have a CSV file with multiple columns. So for that, I'm going to use this CSV minx. Okay, so you have to use this file. You can download this file from the uploaded zip file. We're going to use that file. Okay, so now I'm going to create a new file folder. Read CSV. And file location with file name. You have to see where you have downloaded in your system. Okay, and then chapter 6 folder. Okay, here I'm going to use index call attribute. So where I'm going to specify what indexes I want to use, index call attribute. Okay, key 1, key 2. Key 1. So maybe I'll show you how it looks like. Look at the file. It has key 1, key 2, value 1, value 2. So I want to take this first two column as index. So that's why I have specified index called key 1 and key 2. You can see index called key 1, key 2. So that will be taken as a main index values. So if you run it, you can see this key 1 and key 2 will be taken as new index values. That is, you can see how it will be taken here. So key 1, key 2. So all the 1 will be taken as 1 and the remaining 2. So it just avoid the duplication and set it like all the 2 will be considered as a one category. Okay. So this is index call attribute. The next we are going to see then NEN attribute. So it means NA values attribute. Okay. NA underscore values is the attribute, will help us to replace the given value with not a number, with null values. Okay. So we are going to see, we are going to use this ex2 file for this. So you can see file has 3 rows. It will be there in your folder. We're going to use that folder here. Okay, so let's use the read CSV file function to read that ext.csv file, and let's create a new variable folder data6 and file location, and we're going to use the CSV file. Okay, and the attribute that we are going to use is n underscore value, NA underscore value attribute. Underscore values. Okay, so here we are going to specify wherever we have the hello and world, all those columns is going to, all those cells is going to have not a number, that is null value. So we're going to say that as a string. Wherever we have the hello, so this will be particularly useful. And see, whenever you have to use more than one value, always go for list. So let's create it as a list variable, list element, okay? Hello and world. So wherever we have that in our data, we are going to use NA values attribute, okay? So you can see in our original data, hello world, wherever we have that, there we have replaced with NaN value, not a null value. Okay. So the next thing, N rows attribute. So N rows attribute will help us to specify number of rows in the file we want to read. So it will be useful for reading a particular pieces of the large file. We have a very huge rows, big file with hundreds of rows. Either we can use head function to read it, or we can use the N rows attribute. Okay, so both will be helpful to pick a particular number of rows from the data. Let's take a new file called ex6.csv file. You can see it has it is kind of little bit different file with rows and columns. Some of the rows and columns are null values. So let's take that exe.csv file, ex6.csv file. Okay, let's create a new file folder, data7 pd.read CSV, and we're going to take that ex.csv file. We're going to specify we want to pick only few rows. For that, we have to use N rows attribute. Fine. You can see how many rows it has initially. It has 6 rows with until 4. Okay, maybe I will just use 3. You can see 0, 1, 2. So it is similar like head function. So instead of using head function, you can use nrows attribute, but both are similar. The functionality of using head function and nrows attribute is similar. So from the huge big file, if you want to select only particular rows, then you can use nrows attribute. So the same like selecting particular rows, you can even select particular column from the file. For that, you have to use calls attribute. Because in practice, all the columns of the CSV file are not important. Sometimes we have to ignore few columns. So in that case, you can select only the necessary column after loading the file. But if you're aware of those, what are the columns that you don't need beforehand, then you can save some space and time, right? Instead of looking at that, you can simply pass the column values that we are interested in, that we can pass it as an attribute. So for that, we are going to use call as an attribute that will help us to pick a particular column. For example, let's take the same ex6.csv file. We have unnamed 1 and unnamed 2. Okay, so maybe take another file. Okay, use calls attribute. Dot read CSV ex8.csv file, and we're going to use calls attribute, use calls 1 see, you can see what is there in this column, EX log. So we are just going to use this 1, 2, 3, 4 and key. Okay, we are going to ignore the first two rows, first two columns. Okay, so in that case, maybe I will just copy this. Three, 4, and then key. Okay, so those are the parameters that we want to use. Okay, so we are using this use calls attribute to specify what is the column that we want to process. From the X file, we just ignore the other columns and we have selected only 5 columns from here by specifying the use calls attribute. Okay, use calls attribute. Okay, so next we are going to see how to one minute.